and this is my channel where I talk about all things knitting. Today I have a knitting podcast episode for you where I'm going to update you on all of the knitting progress I've made on my projects since the last episode, and we have so much to talk about today. I finally have some finished objects, and it's going to be a frenzy of finished objects. I have 3 to show you, and one of them is actually a surprise that I haven't talked about at all on a knitting podcast episode. I did mention it in my most recent episode where I went over some Petite Knit patterns, but I hadn't done any sort of like lead up to it. So what's that? I don't know all the terms. Is that called a hard launch when you do something and you didn't do any sort of like lead up announcement that you were gonna do it? Or is that called a soft launch? Whatever one it was, I have a surprise finished object for you that I just kind of like impromptu decided to do that I'm very excited to tell you about. So those finished objects that I'm going to go over today is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit that I knit for my grandma, the My Jose hood by NORgard Knitters that I knit for my younger sister, and then the surprise is a pair of penny gloves by Petite Knit that I ended up knitting out of the same yarn that I used for my Monday sweater. So we're going to go over all of those projects today, and then I have a fairly significant project update on my Staffin Sweater as well, and the knit along I'm hosting for the Staffin Sweater is still going on right now. It is going on until March 15th, so there's like 2-ish more weeks of the cow. And then I am going to also bring back into the mix a WIP that I haven't talked about in a while, which is the Pearly Cardigan by Lea Ambar, and I actually haven't made any progress on this since the last 2 weeks, but I just wanted to kind of like remind myself and remind you guys about this project as well, because it's going to be definitely coming back into something that I'm going to be working on a lot since I need to finish it by the end of March, which I think is doable. So if any of that interests you, I invite you to grab your own project and a cup of tea and hang out with us as we talk about some knitting. So first off, I'm going to start with finished objects. I'm going to go from the largest finished object to the smallest finished object. So we're going to start with the Monday sweater. Here is my finished Monday sweater. It's hard to show in one frame, so I'll definitely, put in some other footage of me wearing it. In my last knitting podcast, I had finished both of the sleeves and I think was like 75% done on the body, just really had to do a little bit more knitting on the body, and then I did a fairly long hem. At the time of my last knitting podcast, I think I was saying that I wasn't going to do as long of a hem as the pattern suggested, but then as I was knitting it, I was starting to get afraid that this garment wasn't going to be as long as I actually wanted it to, and so I thought, well, I might as well just like hedge my bets and make it a little bit longer. So I have clearly finished it now. This garment I knit for my grandma for her birthday. Her birthday was in the beginning of February, and so my goal has been to get it to her by the end of February, and so I think I'm going to be able to do that. I'm going to mail this out tomorrow, I think. Even if I don't do the fastest shipping from the postal office, it still will probably get there by the end of the week, but we'll see. I might splurge on some faster shipping to make sure it gets there by the end of February, because I'm also putting another gift knit in with the same package, the My Jose hood that I'm gonna talk about next. So yeah, I might speed up that shipping a little bit just so that the My Jose hood gets there by my sister's birthday, which is in just a few days. But yeah, so this garment I knit for my grandma, and I have definitely talked about this project a lot on this podcast because it was on the needles for about 4 weeks exactly, and so it's been on the past like 3 different podcasts. So this is, as I said, the Monday sweater by Petite Knit, which is a basic raglan that has a ton of short row shaping to make sure it fits really well. I rave about this pattern all of the time. This is the second time I have made this garment, and I absolutely love it and think everyone should knit one, and I'm definitely going to be returning to this pattern again and again. For this version that I made for my grandma, I held 2 yarns together, which you can definitely see the like marling that's happening in the finished garment. The yarns that I held together were Cascade Yarns Cherub DK, which is a 50-50 nylon and acrylic blend. And then I held it with this Lammy Yarns Soft Sensations, which is a acrylic and polyester vegan mohair, which if you have seen any of my other episodes, you also know that I love this yarn so much. And you'll see because I have another project that I'm using it for. So I held these two yarns together and I really like the marling effect that's coming out of them. Honestly, they're not the same color, but they're both obviously green, and I think that the tones worked pretty well together. When I first swatched for this, I had just like a random other green mohair in my stash, and it was like a lot more yellow. It leaned a lot more yellow, and the marling between this pretty dark green, which is the color Ivy Heather, this pretty dark green plus a more like yellowy green, it didn't look as good as this light green that I held it with. So I'm really glad that I decided to order this green instead of using that like yellowy green. So so that worked out pretty good. So this pattern calls for a fingering weight yarn held with a lace weight mohair together. And even though this is Cascade Cherub DK, this is really not, I don't think this is a DK in my opinion. It's more like a sport or like a light sport. I don't think that it is twice the weight of the Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock, which is the fingering weight version of this. I do think that to perfectly achieve gauge, I should have used the Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock, which is a legit fingering weight. But what ended up happening is that I was originally going to hold this yarn single, and then I swatched with it and it was like way too loose. I didn't like the fabric at all. And so then I was swatching with a mohair. And so that's how I ended up purchasing a DK at first, because this is a DK weight pattern, and then I had to supplement it with this mohair. So that's the story behind the yarn. I knit size 4 for my grandma, and my gauge was a little big by about 1 stitch, and so I think I have a, you know, slightly bigger than a size 4 garment in the end. Not quite a size 5, but I think like a 4.5 sort of size garment circumference-wise. And then my grandma asked me to knit it pretty long. That's how she likes the style of her sweaters to be, nice and long and cozy. And so I knit it to about 63 centimeters from the shoulder-ish region, which is the measurement I took from my grandma when I talked to her about this, when she asked me to knit this for her. As I've said before in this podcast, in hindsight, should have measured like from the collar of the sweater that she was wearing to get a better measurement. But I think it's okay. And in the end, even if it's a little bit short, I think it'll like she'll still like it. But I also, when I blocked this, I steamed blocked it. When I blocked this, I did try to stretch it out lengthwise, in addition to stretching out like the ribbing to be not stitching in. And I think that it ended up laying pretty good. Steam blocking is like my new best friend. I can't believe I went so long before trying out steam blocking. It was only like a few months ago that I finally invested in a garment steamer and have been steam blocking everything, and it has been working out really, really well, and I wish I had started it sooner. So if you work with acrylic and are anything like me and thinking like, oh, I don't get to block because I work with acrylic and wet blocking doesn't do anything, that's incorrect. I have now discovered that yeah, steam blocking is great, and it does actually work really well. So in the steam blocking, I did try to lengthen it a little bit, and I think it worked out okay. To be honest, I probably could have even stretched it out even more, but I was a little bit nervous to like totally pull on this fabric a ton, but I still think that the length is gonna be okay. I really enjoyed working with this yarn combination. I had worked with Cherub before, held with Lammy Yarn Soft Sensation, so I already knew that the yarn combination was gonna be really great. It is super drapey and super duper soft, and I think it's gonna be really cozy for my grandma. It is a, you know, a DK weight, so I don't think it's gonna be like crazy, crazy warm, which is good for the climate that she lives in. The climate that I grew up in is not, it's pretty like temperate. It's definitely not warm. It's kind of cool all the time, but it doesn't get like cold the way that it gets like really cold in New Hampshire where I live now. So I think that a light sweater is the perfect sort of garment to wear where she lives. So I think that this, yeah, I'm really happy with this finished object. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give you guys some stats on this finished object, and I will be putting it in the mail very, very soon, probably tomorrow, honestly. So this is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit, and I knit size 4 on 4mm needles, which is the suggested needle size, but my gauge was a little bit big, as I said. I started this on January 15th and then finished it on February 11th. So that is 1 day behind 4 weeks exactly of knitting on this. And I ended up using 7 balls of the Cherub DK and 6 balls of the Lammy yarn Soft Sensations. And so the Cascade yarns Cherub DK is $3.25 a skein, and so that works out to $22.75. And then the Lammy yarns I got for $2.05, which is not their like listed price, but the website that I get it from like has sales all of the time, and so I was able to get the Lammy yarn Soft Sensations for $2.05, and so 6 skeins of that is $12.30, and so when you also account for the pattern cost, which is $7.34, the total for that project is $42.39. However, I can maybe split the pattern cost in half because, like I said, I have made the Monday sweater before, and so I got multiple garments out of purchasing that pattern, and I do plan on making several more Monday sweaters in the future, and so I think I'm gonna get like a lot of bang for my buck, you know, out of that Monday sweater. So that is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit all finished up. My next finished object is the My Jose hood by NORgard Knitters that I knit for my younger sister for her birthday. So there's several February birthdays in my family, which is why I was doing all these gift knits. And this is a hood pattern, again by NORgard Knitters, where it is a garter stitch hood, but then you end up, after you make the hood, you end up increasing on both sides at different rates so that you can get these scarves on each end, and then you can wrap it around yourself lots of times to make it super duper cozy and warm. It's like the epitome of coziness, I think. And this pattern is finished with I-cord edging all around. I don't know if you can see some I-cord edging, and then yeah, I-cord all around. And so what you end up doing after you do your garter stitch, finish all the garter stitching, is that you bind off with an I-cord bind off, and then once you're done with your binding off on one side, you end up picking up stitches and doing a I-cord all around the rest of it. And this pattern actually called for a different type of I-cord than I had ever done before. It was a purl I-cord instead of a knit I-cord. However, I feel like the I-cord looks exactly the same. Let's see if it'll focus. I feel like the I-cord looks exactly the same. I'm showing the side where I added buttonholes, but to me, this, let's see if I can show you that there's like knit looking stitches here. There we go. So to me, this looks like knit stitches on the I-cord, and which is what happens when you do a I-cord where you're knitting every single stitch. And so I'm quite confused about how you could do purl stitches for every stitch and get the same result as doing knit stitches for every stitch in the I-cord, and it still looks like, you know, like there's knit stitches going all the way down. So I don't know, maybe I'm being very silly here about clearly like not understanding something very essential about knitting, but yeah, I am a bit confused about that. I do like how it looks, and it was still just as easy to knit it that way by doing all purls instead of doing knit stitches. But yeah, I'm confused about, like, I thought that like if I did purl stitches the whole time, that maybe it would be like purl bumps on the outside, because when you do knit stitches the whole time, it gets like knits. But then also, of course, the I-cord rolls in on itself. And so maybe you're like seeing the outside. I also, I don't quite remember which side of the work I usually do I-cords from, and it could be that this pattern suggests that you start the I-cord from like the other side of the work that you would normally do an I-cord from. And so then that would result in you getting, you know, just like with stockinette, you get purl bumps on one side and stockinette on the other side. It may have something to do with that. But anyways, tangent there, but it's finished with a purl I-cord, and to me it looks exactly like when I've done knit I-cords. So I knit this pretty much pattern. The only difference, which I was kind of proud of myself for doing, was I ended up, instead of finishing it with I-cord ties, so in the pattern they're off of the edges of the scarf, there are I-cords go out the edge here, so that you can tie it at your neck and make a cute little bow. But my sister didn't want I-cord ties. Instead, she wanted a big button. And so when we were together this past Christmas and we took a little trip to Canada, we found a button shop. And so I got this button, which I don't know if you can tell, but it's got these roses all over it. This really cool big brass button with these roses. And my younger sister's middle name is Rose. And so, you know, that's very fitting. And then of course I use this kind of red maroony color, which I guess like not the color of like bright red roses, but you know, roses are red sort of thing. And this yarn that I knitted out of is Knit Picks Brava Sport, which I've had in my stash for a really long time. And it's a 100% acrylic yarn from Knit Picks. Brava is Knit Picks acrylic line, and so they've got Brava worsted, they have different like speckled, they have Brava bulky, they have all sorts of different like lines of Brava. And this is their sport weight line, but honestly, you could probably substitute any sort of like DK weight pattern with Brava Sport and be fine. Their Brava worsted or like normal Brava is definitely not a DK, and the Brava bulky is like quite big. And then they also have Brava Recycle made out of recycled acrylic, and the Brava Recycle is, I would say, like a sport or DK. It's definitely thinner than Brava worsted or Brava bulky, but I think that if you wanted to use Brava for a DK weight pattern and just wanted to hold one strand single, I think you could get away with using Brava Sport. So yeah, that would be fine. I ended up using 2 skeins of yarn to make this, and I will say it is a lot of knitting. And so if you are interested in making the My Jose hood, I would just prepare yourself for maybe more knitting than you are expecting. Like, it is a big wraparound scarf. The finished garment is like over 150 centimeters long at the end, like many centimeters more than that actually. And so you have lots of stitches on your needles for those last few rows. So yeah, just like make sure your expectations are in line, I guess, with how long it's gonna take. I did notice on several different Ravelry projects that people commented like, oh, this took a lot longer than I was expecting. So it's definitely a good project. I really enjoyed knitting it. Just be aware that it's not a project you're gonna finish in a few days. It's definitely gonna take like it took me about like 2-ish weeks to knit this. The way that I inserted buttonholes into this pattern is very simple, just something that I had learned from doing buttonholes in cardigans before. And this method is clean enough, I would say. And that's just that I made some yarn overs it's because it's kind of hard to see those holes, but there's 5 different holes here. Oh, there we go. So there's 5 different holes here, and so on the same row, I just did 5 yarn overs that were the same distance apart. Let's see, I think maybe it looks like I did like 5 stitches in between each yarn over. And so I was battling with exactly how to do this because I obviously wanted the buttonholes to be like very close to the edge of the scarf so that it would go all the way around and like meet up where the button is gonna be. Like if the buttonhole was way back here in the scarf and not right at the tip of the end of the scarf, then it wouldn't work as a closure method. So I did struggle a bit with the placement of the buttonholes. Because I also didn't want the buttonhole to be at like the very, very edge of I didn't want it to be right here because I was worried that it would just be like not that sturdy and like, I don't know, stretch out more maybe. I just wanted like a little bit more structure around that buttonhole. And so I ended up making this like a tiny bit longer than it would have been normally, just because I wanted this extra length after the like closest buttonhole. And I also added multiple buttonholes in here because I wanted to make sure that my sister would always be able to find a buttonhole that would work, and then also so that she could make it looser or tighter depending on what she wanted to do. Like if it was really, really windy or something, maybe she would want to use one of these like further buttonholes. But if she wanted it laying more loosely around herself, she could use just like the closest buttonhole. And just, yeah, just for ease of wearing, it seemed like a good idea to add multiple buttonholes. So I do like the placement in terms of like how far away it is from this, like the tip of the edge of the scarf here. But I in retrospect, I should have I should have figured out a way to make it so that this first buttonhole wasn't like right at this side edge here. Just because in terms of, again, of structure, it does help that there's an I-cord like right there. But before the I-cord, there was like one tiny little string going on this other side of the buttonhole, and I was like, oh, that's not gonna be good. I feel like a button's just gonna flip right out of that. And so adding the I-cord edging helped a lot, but then also like when I had to pick up stitches for the I-cord edging, it was kind of sketchy. So what I had done is that when I made that first buttonhole yarn over, I was right after I had like added an increase. So it was like right at the edge of, yeah, it was like right at the last few stitches of the row. And so I think what I should have done is actually make this even longer so that I could have added that yarn over, not right at the edge of the row. So it was like, at the time, I think I had like 2 stitches on my, like I knit like 2 stitches of the row and then added the yarn over again because I did want to make it further down. But I think what I should have done is once I figured out like the point at which I wanted the buttonhole to be, I should have like marked that with a stitch marker, knit a few more rows so that it was kind of like adding more rows to the bottom of where that buttonhole was going to be, knit a few more rows, and then added the yarn over at that same position so that I wasn't like right at the edge. And then I think it would have kind of like raised up where that buttonhole was going to be, and so that it wasn't going to be, so that it wouldn't be like right at the edge. Right at the edge here, it would have been like a tiny bit shifted over, like right there instead, right in the middle of the 2 I-cords. So if I was like designing this, I would have done like fiddled with the math a little bit and figured that out. But of course, this is a modification to the pattern, so this is not the way the pattern is written. It's just something that I kind of randomly added in. So it's not perfect. But I did learn some things, and if I ever had to impromptu add buttonholes to a scarf again, I think I know what to do. But so if you want to add some buttonholes to your My Jose hood, if you're knitting this as well, that's just something to keep in mind. But I did, I have put this on a couple times, and I'm very happy that the button, it's like working out. It's at a place where you can, it's like kind of towards the center of it after you wrap around, and it's able to reach all the way around. I was getting worried that after I knit it and I was like working on the I-cord edging, so like no more length was being added, I was getting worried that I had like miscalculated and it wasn't long enough. But it's okay. It goes all the way around, and I was able to stretch it out a little bit with blocking, and everything worked out okay. Now my only real worry is that when I tied in the button that I didn't do a strong enough job, but I did go around it like lots of times so that my sister can reef on it without worries. But also my mother knows how to sew, and so she could like reinforce it if it comes off, and also my sister could bring it back to me and I could fix it too if the button comes off. So the other nice thing about Brava is that it is completely machine washable, and so what I did when I finished this garment is that I threw it in the washing machine, and then I dried it on low heat. Whenever I wash my acrylics, I dry them on low heat. Just like, you just look at the yarn label and see what it says for the washing requirements. Because not every single acrylic can be washed. Most of them can, but not all of them. For example, this yarn, Lammy Yarn Soft Sensations, cannot be put into the washing machine. And I have actually tried it, and the bits of fluff kind of like got all stringy, and it wasn't like ruined, but it definitely did not look like the way that it looked in the first place. I just did that as an experiment because I really wanted it to be machine washable. I kind of prefer things to be like that, but it's not. So the label on this mohair is correct, so I'm not going to be washing in the washing machine anything that I use this for, but that's okay. But Brava Sport is machine washable, so before I added the button, I threw it into the washing machine, and then I did low heat dry, and then I added the button. And after that, I steam blocked it because even though it did like kind of loosen up a bit in the washing machine, it didn't, my edges of my scarf were not perfectly straight. Like the yeah, like the edging was not perfectly straight. I think maybe just because I had like messed up a little bit on picking up stitches for my applied I-cord edging. And so I was able to kind of like pin that out, stretch it out, and then go over it with the steamer to fix it. So this has gotten washed and steam blocked. And now it's ready to go. So I'm very excited to send this to my sister. My sister is totally okay with surprises being spoiled, so I actually already sent her a picture of me wearing it to tell her that it's done, and she was really excited, so I'm really happy to be giving this to her for her birthday. So we can go over the finished stats for this garment. This is again, my Jose hood by NORgard Knitters. I knit mine on 4.5mm needles, which is below the suggested needle size. The suggested needle size, I believe, is 5mm needles, but because I was using a lighter weight yarn, I had to go down a needle size to get the sort of fabric that I wanted. There's only one size in this pattern, so that's the size that I followed. And I ended up, like I said, using 2 skeins of Knit Picks Brava Sport, and these had been in my stash for a while, so it doesn't really feel like I spent money on them, but of course I had to buy them at some point. These are $3.99 a ball, and so for 2 skeins of them, it's about $7.98. The pattern is $8.81, so the pattern was more expensive than the yarn for this one. And then I do have that button. I actually don't remember how much that one button was, but let's just call it $3. And so that would mean that this project is $19.79 for a total project cost, and I cast this on February 3rd and finished it on February 21st, and so it took me 18 days to knit, so over 2 weeks of knitting. I was knitting on it at the same time that I was working on the Monday sweater a bit, but when I finished the Monday sweater, I got a lot more done on the my Jose hood. So there was definitely times in those 18 days where I was like super focused knitting on it. So like I said, it is a lot of knitting. I was kind of getting sick of it towards the end, but that's, I think, mainly just because I did have a deadline for this. If I had this pattern going on just like completely in the background, just knitting on it whenever I felt like it, I do think that the knitting experience would have been slightly more enjoyable. It's not like that the knitting experience was bad. It's just that towards the end of it, I was kind of sick of doing garter stitch. And so if it had been a non-deadline knit, whenever I got to that point that I was feeling like that, I could have put it away and then worked on something else and come back to it later. But I didn't really have the luxury of being able to do that for this project. So yeah, I was getting kind of sick of it in the end, but I am really happy with the finished object and so excited to give it to my sister. The final finished object I have to show you today is a pair of penny gloves by Petite Knit. So let's put these on here. If you watched my most recent video, I did talk about these already, so it'll be a little bit of reiteration here, but for those of you who didn't catch that video, this is again a pattern by Petite Knit. These are a very popular pattern by her for some fingerless gloves, and it's pretty basic. It's just like a stockinette tube, and then you've got, of course, a little like thumb addition, and it is finished with not I-cord edging, that's my Jose hood. It's finished with pearl bump rows that you start out with and then that you finish at the end, which like keeps the fabric from rolling and just kind of, I think it does give it like a pretty clean finish here. And so, okay, the story behind these gloves is I finished the Monday sweater, which like this fabric might look quite familiar. I finished the Monday sweater and I just loved that fabric so much, loved that yarn so much, and I was really feeling the green, and I kind of was sad that I wasn't working with the yarn anymore when I finished it, and I wanted some of that softness on me as well. And so I was kind of looking through my pattern library of things I already owned, and I noticed that I had the penny glove pattern and I have never made them. And I think I purchased this pattern like 2 years ago or something. I'm pretty sure I was originally planning on making a pair of these for my stepmom for Christmas in 2023, but then ended up using a different fingerless glove pattern. I ended up making one with cables. I guess I wanted something that was fancier. So I had already purchased the penny glove pattern, and so I wanted something that I could make with that green yarn that I was using for the Monday sweater. So this seemed like a pretty good fit. And then also, I don't know, I've had the same projects on my needles for the same few projects on my needles for a really long time. And I think I just needed to shake something up, a little bit of palette cleanser before I like kept going, and something for myself before I kept going too. So yeah, this was like a really perfect project for that. It was so quick. So I knit one of these on Valentine's Day on February 14th, and then I knit the next one on February 15th. So it was like a long Friday evening, and then kind of like throughout the day on Saturday. I will say it was a long Friday evening. It was one of those things where I got to the point in the pattern where it seemed like I was pretty close to being done, and you have that like thought in your head where like, oh, I maybe could finish this before I go to bed. And that was at like 9 p.m. or something, or no, maybe a little bit later. Maybe it was at like 10 p.m. or something. And I thought to myself like, oh, I only have, I think I had split at like 10ish or something. I had split for the thumb. And so I had to finish the like finger part and then also knit the thumb. And so I thought to myself like, oh, I could finish this before I go to bed. And once I had that idea in my mind that I could finish it before I go to bed, I like couldn't stop. And but then it ended up taking like another like 2 hours to finish this and to finish that. I can't exactly remember what time it was when I like made the decision that I was going to keep going, but I ended up staying up till like midnight that night, because I had this, at one point in the night, I thought to myself, let's finish this. So yeah, I don't know if that's happened to any of you before, where you're like, you get like just close enough to the end of a project, or just close enough to like maybe like the end of a repeat or something, where you tell yourself like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, quickly finish this before I go to bed. Like that'll be a good place to stop. And then ends up being like multiple hours later that you actually end up going to bed because you're knitting on it. And had just like put this like self-imposed, you know, point that you were gonna stop for like no reason. So that's what happened for like one of these gloves. And then I slightly more leisurely knit the second one on Saturday, but they're still super duper quick. I do think that you could finish them in a weekend without having to like be crazy about like only knitting and that's the only thing that you were doing. Like the Saturday that I knit these, I also went skiing, and me and my boyfriend did our Valentine's celebration on the 15th instead of the 14th. So I still like did other things the day that I knit these. Still went skiing, still like went out to dinner and stuff. So yeah, you don't have to like in order to finish one of these in one day, it doesn't have to be the only thing you do that day. So these are a really good palette cleanser, really good stash buster. I used one skein of each of the Cherub DK and the Lammy Yarn Soft Sensations, and didn't even finish those skeins. And so you could almost, I think I could get like 3 penny gloves out of one skein of the Cherub DK. And so if you had 1 skein of mohair and 2 skeins of like fingering weight, or I guess 1 large skein of fingering weight, but like 2 skeins of this DK, I probably could have gotten over 2 penny gloves out of it. So it really doesn't use that much yarn. It's perfect for scraps. So quick stats on this is there's only one size, so I knit that one size. I used 3mm needles, which is the suggested needle size, and it took me 2 days to knit. And 1 skein of the Cherub DK and 1 skein of the Lammy Yarn Soft Sensations is $3.25 plus $2.05, so $5.30 for the yarn, and then $5.14 for the pattern. Means that these penny gloves cost me $10.44, but I might end up making more of these in the future, so I think this is going to be another case where I'm getting like multiple projects out of the cost of one pattern. So penny gloves by Petite Knit, my last finished object for today. So those are all of my finished objects, and now let's get into my WIPs. So I think it's pretty clear I have been mainly putting all of my effort into the Monday sweater and the My Jose hood in the past few weeks, which is why they're finished. I definitely was not very far on the My Jose hood the last time we spoke, so I think it's pretty clear where all the effort has been put into. But I did finish the My Jose hood a few days ago, and the Monday sweater was done a few days before that as well. So I did have a few days to focus on my Staffin Sweater, which is the WIP I'm going to tell you about. And this gauge is 16 stitches for 10 centimeters. yeah, 16 stitches for 10 centimeters, so big, really big gauge, and that means that things go really, really quickly. And so in my last project update, I was like an inch or something into the body, like 2 centimeters or something, just joined onto the arms basically. And I have actually in just a few days, like 2 days basically, have been able to finish the body. Yeah. Which I was not really expecting, but it just like flew by. So before I get into my project, just a little bit of information about this pattern. So this is the Staffin Sweater by Rebecca Clow, the Crayabea. I am hosting a knit along for this pattern with Delaney of Black Dog Knits, and we started it on January 15th, and the cal is going through March 15th. So it is kind of towards the end of when we're gonna be hosting this, but if you wanna, if you're also knitting this pattern and want to just like pop in and say hi just for a little bit, I'm still happy to add more people to the group chat up until the end of the cal. And so if you are interested in knitting any of the Staffin patterns with us, so that would be the Staffin Sweater, the Staffin Cardigan, or the Staffin Vest, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at knits.by.lizzy and I will add you to the group chat. It's been really nice to get some support for this project and just like build a sense of knitting community. This is the first knit along that I've hosted, and so for me it was you know, it was a good step my toe into the waters of hosting a knit along. This one's very casual, there's no prizes, it's just a group of knitters excited about the same pattern and knitting it all together. So I do think that this will also help me in the future if I end up hosting any sort of larger knit alongs that do have prizes. But yeah, it's been a really great experience. So nice to meet everyone in the cal. So if you're in the cal and you're watching this, hello. It's been nice chatting with everyone. So yeah, if you would like to pop in for the last few days or weeks of this knit along, you can I'll still add you to the group chat at knits.by.lizzy on Instagram. Send me a DM. I am clearly making the pullover version of this sweater, and I am knitting size 2, but I did end up stopping my increases for the yoke quite a bit earlier than she said to. So I think this is more like a 1.5, a size 1.5. And this means that my yoke depth is also way shorter than hers was gonna be. So I did modify some sizing in that sense, but I'm really happy with how it fits. So I'm really glad with the I'm really happy with the circumference of the body and like the yoke depth and everything, so I'm happy with that decision. The only thing I'm curious about is whether these sleeves are gonna be too big. Right now they are looking kind of big to me, but that might change once I actually start them. They might, you know, it might just be like the fact that they're on this try-it-on tubing is why they're looking kind of weird. But yeah, we'll see. So that's really the only modification that I made, but I think, you know, sizing modifications are pretty classic. And I don't even know, you know, length-wise, I just did my own thing, which is pretty much what I always do. So I don't really know how far off I am on length. I bet I knit it shorter on length because I pretty much always do that because I'm only 5'1", so length suggestions are pretty much always too long for me. The yarn that I am knitting this sweater in is I'm holding two strands together to get kind of a worsted weight gauge. The first is Hobbii Amigo, which is a 100% acrylic yarn from Hobbii, which is a DK weight gauge, a DK weight yarn, and I really like this yarn. It is my preferred acrylic yarn for just like workhorse kind of things. I do prefer it over Knit Picks Brava. The Brava Sport that I had in my stash that I knit the My Jose hood in, I purchased a long time ago, and I haven't really purchased much Brava since then. I think I would probably only do that because it is fine, but I think I'd probably only purchase more Brava if there was like a very specific color that I needed, because I do find that the Hobbii Amigo is like a little bit softer, and it, definitely when you wash it, it gets a little bit more drapier than Knit Picks Brava. So that's really the main difference. So I'm holding Hobbii Amigo with Lammy yarn Soft Sensations, that same mohair that I use all the time, and in this gray color, so held with this dark gray. They are like a fairly close match, and I don't think you can't really see that much marling in the finished project. I discussed on my last update that the texture wasn't coming through as much as I wanted it to, probably because of the mohair. And someone also commented like, yeah, you're right, I think it is the mohair. So you're just like validating my guess. Like, I think the next time I knit any sort of textured knit and purl based textured thing, I'm not gonna be using mohair. I'm gonna try to use an acrylic and cotton blend and see how that goes. But I will say that when as I've been making more and more of the texture, I don't know if the like diamond part of the texture pops out necessarily, but like obviously you can see that there's different bands of pattern going on. So I think even though the stitch definition is not exactly what I had hoped for, it's still, I'm still getting the same sort of like style and vibe that I wanted from the sweater. So I'm not like super disappointed in my yarn choice. It's just, I think it was just like a learning experience, I think mainly. And now I know for next time. So maybe this will help you. I don't think mohair was the right choice. If you want to knit this sweater and you're gonna be, I guess if you're gonna be using acrylic as well, maybe no mohair. But yeah, like I said, I definitely think it's still wearable. I do like the color. You can tell that there's different bands, like it's okay. I also had a bit of a conundrum, or like I had to pause and think for a bit about the length of this. And really what I was thinking about was, what is the best point in this pattern to stop, to break up the pattern and start the hem ribbing. So I did 1 by 1 ribbing on the hem, and then an Italian sewn bind off. I didn't do any setup rows. I just went straight into the sewn bind off. And when I got to this point, right at the edge of the section of 2 by 2 ribbing, is when I stopped and I put it on some tubing and I tried it on, and I was, you know, looking at where it was hitting on my body, and then I also laid it down against some of my other sweaters to see like the length, and it was right at it still needed a little bit more length before some ribbing, but if I measured like the whole length of what this section of texture was, the section of texture where you've got the bobbles and then the diamonds and then bobbles again, that if I added that whole other band of texture, I think it was going to be too long and make it a lot less wearable for me. So I didn't want to go all the way through. And so at first I was debating, basically, do I want to make this too short or too long, which is like, I was thinking, okay, well, if I go right into the ribbing, the 1 by 1 ribbing right now, it'll be too short. But if I do a whole nother band of diamonds and bobbles, then it's going to be too long. And so my compromise was that I just did 1 line of the bobbles, and I do think that was the right decision. I like the length that it's at now, and also I didn't really love the idea of going from 2 by 2 ribbing like right into 1 by 1 ribbing. I'm glad that I have like a tiny bit of like sectioning off of that 2 by 2 ribbing before the hem. And also you'll notice that like the bobbles are separating like every single band, and so to me it kind of feels like by adding this final bobble section, it's like I just finished off the 2 by 2 ribbing band, because in between the diamonds and the 2 by 2 ribbing is a bobble section, so I just added another bobble section before I went into the hem. So that was my length compromise, and I think it worked out okay. And I'll probably do that with the sleeves as well, is before I go into the cuff, I'll just knit a bobble row, like make sure that I've done like 1 of those faux bobble repeats before I go into the hem. Got some Ollie here. She wants to sit on the knitting. So at this point now, I just have to do the sleeves, so this will surely be a finished object in the next episode. My goal for this has been to finish it by the end of the cal, which is March 15th, so over 2 weeks from now, and I think I'm definitely gonna be able to reach that goal. Like, having a finished staffing garment was not the point of the knit along. Like, you weren't required to, by any means, were not required to finish your staffing garment by the end of the knit along. It was just, let's knit this together from this time. But for me, it was an easy landmark to put for a goal for finishing this garment. I won't freak out if I don't finish it by March 15th. I'm trying really not to put, after having so much deadline knitting, I'm trying not to put any more deadlines on myself. But I think it's like a super easy goal to have this done in over 2 weeks, because honestly, if the sleeves go as quick as the body, I might have this done in like 1 week, because the gauge, the 16 stitch gauge, just flies by. I should knit more things at that gauge. It's really, really fun. I think a lot of Rebecca Clow's patterns are actually, you know, like that 16, somewhere between that 16 to 18 stitch gauge. I think she also enjoys like knitting projects fairly quickly and having that nice big gauge to make them go quickly. Also, actually, I'm pretty sure that the Tolsta patterns are a thick, are a big gauge as well. So I might try one of those this summer and see how that is, because all of the summer garments I did last year were like pretty tight on 3mm needles and took a really long time. So I am kind of curious what that experience is like of making a summer garment at that really big gauge. So I think I might try that. So you can look out for my Staffin sweater as a finished object very, very soon. Finally, I am going to briefly bring back into the mix my Pearly Cardigan. So this is a cardigan pattern by Lea Ambar that I am test knitting for her, and the test knit ends at the end of March, and so I bet that this pattern will come out like fairly soon after that, would be my guess. I don't, you know, don't hold me to that. She hasn't said anything about that, but just because the test knit will end at the end, will be done at the end of March, I wouldn't be surprised if it was out like, you know, a few weeks after that. So you could probably be looking for this pattern pretty soon. And this cardigan is really cool because it has these I-cord edgings like all around each panel of the cardigan, like each section of the cardigan. And so you can really have fun with playing around with different colors, of having like a low contrast color or a really high contrast color. It's just like a really fun way. Those I-cords are a really fun way to bring in like a pop of color and just like really play around with it. And it's been really cool to see the other testers' versions, because like changing the different colors that you use, I think totally changes the vibe of the cardigan. And so yeah, you can do so many things with it. It's really, really cool. So this is my version that I'm working on here. I actually have not done anything in the past 2 weeks, like since the last update. I didn't even mention this garment in my last episode, or like I didn't even show it in my last episode because I hadn't worked on it, and this has kind of been in timeout for like a month. But I just wanted to bring it back on here to remind everyone that it's coming back. It's coming back into the mix. I am knitting size 3, test knitting size 3 for her. I am gonna be gifting this garment as well. This is gonna be for my older sister, and so the colors here were chosen by her. I asked her if she wanted a cardigan, and if she did, what would be like a main color and a contrast color that she would want in a cardigan. And she said light blue with cream highlights. And so that is what I've got here. I am holding a white fingering weight, which is Cascade Yarn's Cherub sock, so the fingering weight of Cherub. Holding that with Lammy Yarn Soft Sensations in this light blue. And so the light blue is clearly coming through really, really well in the fabric, and making a really cool marled look. So yeah, so it's making a pretty cool marled effect in the garment here. And then for the I-cord edging for my contrast, I am using, holding double. Oh, it's really hard to see the colors here. I'm holding double this Cascade Yarn's Cherub sock, but instead of in white, it's in ecru, so it's a slightly off white. And when I hold this ecru color on its own and I look at it, it looks white to me. But when I put the actual white, the true white, and the ecru next to each other, you can tell that this one is like has like a slightly warmer tint to it. And so I think you can tell that they're actually different colors. So that worked out pretty good. And so I've got these I-cord edging cream highlights. And at the point where I am now, I am going to be adding some I-cord edging around the armholes, and then I will be continuing on the body, or I guess I could do the sleeve too, but yeah, I've finished the yoke. The construction of this is a saddle shoulder construction, so you start off with these like square panels, and then you pick up all around it to add different parts, and then you are also connecting them all with some I-cords. So it is a super engaging construction for the yoke. I think now I'm going to be getting into more of a rhythm with it because I'll just be like knitting away on the body. But definitely the yoke was something where you're doing something for like an hour and then you need to look at the next instruction, doing something for like an hour and then looking at the next instruction. So the yoke was definitely not like TV knitting, but it was really fun and engaging. So I did enjoy that. So that is where I'm at now. Again, I think the Staffin is gonna be done like pretty quick. So I have a feeling that this is gonna become my main focus very, very soon. I don't think it's realistic to think that it's gonna be done in like 2 weeks. It's probably not gonna be done in the next podcast, but definitely by the end of March, because that's when I have to have it done. But probably before then, to be honest. So that is the Pearly Cardigan by Lea Ambar. Those are all the projects I have to tell you about today. I am so happy to be actually sharing some finished objects for once. It's been like 6 weeks or something since I've had a finished object, so that feels really, really nice. I am itching to cast on new things. Like, as you can tell, I cast on those penny gloves because of that, so I'm really itching to cast on new things. First, gotta finish my whips, and I think like by the end of March for sure, both the Staffin and the Pearly Cardigan are gonna be done. I will definitely let you guys know in the next episode how my gift giving went. So I'm gonna, mail off my Monday sweater and my Jose hood tomorrow, I think, and I'll see if they'll take some pictures. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to get them too because I'm not going to actually be there. But I will ask them to take pictures if they would like to share it. So there might be some pictures of them wearing it, which will be nice. We've got a kitty right here. Do any of your cats just like follow you around? Ollie, my cat here, she doesn't like sit on laps or anything like that, but she likes to be near people. So she'll just come over and just like sit like a foot away, but it's like doesn't want to be sitting on your lap. But I think it's still sweet. So she's here. I think she made an appearance in the last, a little bit of her made an appearance in the last podcast too. But yeah, that's where we're at. A little bit of a life update for me, which I thought I might start doing at the end of podcasts for anyone who is interested, is that right now I am finishing up my graduate degree, and so I am starting to look for the next step in my career, and I actually have an interview coming up in a few weeks in California. So I'm going to be traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast and doing an interview. It's going to be for a postdoc position, so the interview process for those positions is, it's fairly long and intense, so that'll be like a lot of prep on my end, but is also exciting. I'm definitely entering and, about to enter a big transition period as I finish up my degree and start the next stage in my training, in my career. So that's gonna be pretty big. If I do, I'm gonna be applying to, several different jobs. But if I do end up in California, I am kind of curious how my like knitting might change. Right now I live in New Hampshire where it gets very, very cold in the winter, and so sweaters are like, it makes a lot of sense to be knitting a lot of sweaters, and I do prefer to knit sweaters. Like, that's my favorite type of garment to knit. And so if I end up moving to California, especially if I end up moving to Southern California where it's really, really warm, I am kind of curious if my knitting like routine is going to change, if I'm going to end up knitting a ton of shirts instead, or a ton of tank tops instead or something, or maybe I'll make socks. I could see myself making a lot of socks just because I don't knit a lot of socks right now just because my attention is taken by sweaters so much, but I would love to have a lot of socks. So I might, if I end up moving to California, I might just like knit more socks. So I am curious if anyone watching is from California or from a warm weather place. Do you still knit sweaters? Like, what's the main thing that you knit if you're from a warm weather place? I'm very curious. So that might be coming up. It wouldn't be for like many months that I would actually move, like over 6 months probably before I would move. So there's lots of time to think about that. And I haven't even picked a job yet, but it is a possibility because I do have this job interview. If I do get offered it, there's a possibility that I might be moving to California. So So we'll see. But I'm about to enter a big life transition. So that's both scary and exciting all at the same time. So I think with that, I'm going to finish off. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would really appreciate it. That really helps this video find more viewers like you. And if you enjoy my content, my knitting content, please feel free to subscribe and hang out with us more often. I would really appreciate that as well. So with that, I'm gonna send lots of big hugs to everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.